Andreas Andersson. I'm here on the Ahrex Hooks channel to tie one of my favorite patterns for, well, I guess just about any predatory fish. Normally it would look something like this. This is the original or standard version with 2 hooks, but today I'll show you the smaller version, which can be used for either smaller fish or big fish that usually eat small stuff. A lot of people have been using these for example, sea-round brown trout, but also a lot larger fish like tarpon, for example, that is a huge fish but might eat a smaller bait. In that case, you're going to need to switch to a lot stronger hook, but this type of fly has still produced a lot of good results for people fishing for such fish. The pattern in itself is very basic, especially in the mini Sid, which I'm going to be tying today. It's going to be flashy chenille, and in this case I'm going to do an accent with some gold and silver mix. The body and tail is going to be rabbitstrip, and the front part of the fly will be a wedge head using deer belly hair. And it's going to look something like this. So let's tie one. Going to start off with this is going to be a smaller version for sea-round browns. So this is a size 2 of the Ahrex TP 650. And I'm going to be using a very bright red thread just to help you see what I'm doing with my thread wraps for the body part of the fly. I'm going to start with some silver at the back part of the body. Just going to give a little bit of silver flash. But since this is a slightly smaller fly, so I'm going to shorten this flashy chenille a little bit. Find the tip and tie that in. And come back. Next up, rabbitstrip. It's always easier to work with rabbitstrips if you make them just a little bit wet, like such. And I'm going to separate it, measure it to make sure I got enough. A little bit too much is okay because you can cut it off. Too little is not. And then just with the point of my scissor, I'm going to make sure I got a clean separation here. And to make it simpler, you can just make it a little bit wet there as well. Place it, 1 loose wrap, 2 loose wraps, and then come tight and you can do another one. The reason why I'm doing those loose wraps and then putting pressure on the thread is that you eliminate the tendency for the material to twist on the hook. So it's just a simple way to not have to deal with that. Then I'm going to cover the thread and the hook shank going forward and come back a little bit. Like such. Wrap the silver forward, using my left hand to just fold some of those fibers back. It's going to be fine. Okay. Some of those are a little bit long, so I can just trim it. Then some of this super shiny golden stuff. Just going to find the tip and tie it in. And what I'm looking to do with this is just basically do just 1 wrap. On a larger fly, it could be obviously a lot more. But for this, I just want this to be a yellow or a gold accent on top of the silver. And this is definitely a point in the fly where you can be a little bit creative. You can, perhaps if you want, put in a red throat or something like that, red gill plates or gills. And lock that rabbit strip in with a couple of wraps. That. And we finish. See, I locked in a few of those gold ones, so we can just pick that out. Just controlling some strays there. Next, we're going to switch to a stronger thread to handle the deer hair work. And this is a vises GSP 200 in white. Since these GSP or Dyneema threads are super slippery, I'm just gonna do a very light coating on the hook shank with just super glue, just to make sure it doesn't slip. Thread base, moving all the way up to the rabbit strip. Straight there. Switching scissors to a very long shank, a long cutting area with a blunt tip. And this is going to help me when cutting the deer hair. This is deer belly hair in just a gray. So I'm going to pick out a pretty substantial clump here, and as I'm cutting it, I'm separating the amount I want, putting the scissors down at the base and pull with this hand. That way you get all of it off the hide, like that. It's a good tip for you. I have to move that. And use a comb to get rid of some of those under fur finer fibers that keeps the animal warm but makes the fly a lot worse. So you just want these thicker guard hairs. And here you can just measure how long you would like the head or the collar to be, and grab hold accordingly. I do place it on top while still holding it. Do one loose wrap, two loose wraps, like that, and then I'm going to press down on top here. What this is going to do, and then grab hold of the collar part with 3 fingers like this. When I'm putting tension on this, the hairs will be all the way around the hook. So it's basically like a stacking technique, because I won't let the hairs spin. I will keep it in place like when you stack deer hair, but it's going to be 360 around the hook. So it's a 360 stack, I guess. And you can see it's all around the hook. And what I'm going to do now to lock it in very tightly is just walk forward with the thread, a little bit of just through the deer hair, but going forward slightly with each turn. Probably going to be 4 or 5 turns here. Going forward just a little bit at a time, like such, and now it's very much locked in to where I want it. Just get something to separate those hairs. I'm not pushing hard now, but I'm just making it easier for myself to find the rest of the hook. Make sure you get the tension back, and then lock that tension in with a couple of wraps like such. So we got some naked thread left here. No, naked hook. And we're gonna fill that with some more deer hair. prepare that in the same way. Let's get those under furs out. This is kind of messy, but that's just the name of the game with deer hair. It's going to be a little bit of a mess anytime you do big deer hair stuff. It just is what it is. What I do to help with getting the thread through when I do those locking turns is on the second clump, since I'm not going to be using it as the collar and the part of the head, this is just going to be head. I can just cut the tips, and it makes it a little bit easier. Right here, if you want, you can actually put just a tiny drop of super glue. That's not really to hold these hairs in, it's mostly to lock in the thread tension of the previous wraps. It actually helps with a little bit more traction for the thread. And I'm doing this part as well, so it won't hurt. See, what I got now is quite steep angle here and all the hairs on top. So I'm going to give it a push like I did before and to spread it around the hook. But a big difference when I'm putting tension on this this stack of hair is where which angle I'm placing the tension is going to have to be going backwards, diagonally down. Otherwise, if I'm pulling downwards like where it is now, this hair and this clump will just fall off the hook and you'll be mad. So going that way is where the pressure is going. So it's pushing the hair, the thread is pushing or pulling the hair right into the other part of the head. Then you can just use a finger to somehow find the hook eye, and thumb and forefinger just to press it back so you get something to finish off the fly. Find it again, make sure you get all the thread tension back and lock it in with 2 or 3 wraps like such, and then you can do a whip finish. Managed to make a slight mess of it, but it'll be fine. Put a lot of pressure on that knot, just to make sure it just slips into place and locks it in. And pop, there we go. And by this time we can also trim the length of the rabbit fur. Obviously, if you want a longer fly, you can just trim it long, or short fly, trim it short. I'm going for maybe a 3.5, 4 inch thing. So I'm just gonna cut it right there and pop. It's gonna be fine. Now, just to make sure you have all those hair fibers sticking out, you can just give it a little bit of a kind of a brush with a comb or a brush, just to make sure they're all standing up. It's going to make the trimming a little bit easier in some cases if you have managed to catch a few with a thread, so just it makes it a little bit easier. For trimming these types of head, I always move the vise a little bit. I'm gonna place it this way, and I always start with the bottom of the head. And what I do is look for where the hook eye is and use that as a ruler going backwards straight. And the first cut, you always want to make sure you don't go too deep and cut the thread, because then you're in start over again mode. So very safe cut first. That also gives you better visibility of what you're actually doing, since there's less hair in the way. So you can come in and do it a little bit tighter. You definitely want a lot less of the deer hair on the bottom part. of, I guess, any streamer that has a deer hair head. That will certainly help with tracking, especially if you're fishing in a moving river or any type of current. Right, and to get better visibility on the top, we're gonna just make a very safe cut straight up, something like that. And again, I'm gonna use the hook eye as a ruler to make sure I get my cuts straight. And little by little does it. Just keep it safe, make sure you don't cut the thread. All right. Then we're going to do the sides. Excellent. What I'm looking for here, if you see me looking, so looking for straight lines on my vise, just to make sure I got everything straight and lined up. You can always use stuff like flat areas or whatever to use as a reference point to make sure you're doing things straight or long enough when you're tying. For example, you're doing a tail and you make sure you want it this length or that length. You can either mark it on your vise or just have various reference points to look at. That will help you in your consistency and when you're tying as well. All right, so little by little. Decent. A little bit more on top and then yeah, close. All right. Something like that should be fine. Just making sure that it's equally thick on the left and the right side, and that the flat parts, which will do most of the action in this fly at the bottom and the top, is just flat and straight, or flat-ish and straight. From here we can just pop on a pair of eyes. So what I do to make sure I get eyes straight is just, especially on deer hair, place a little bit of super glue on each side where I think I want it, at least roughly. And then be very careful to get the first eye exactly where I want it. That should be fine, like such. And then I will just place the second eye a little bit more like loosely on top of the deer hair and not press down. That way I can go back and forth and make sure I got them absolutely perfectly aligned before I press down on the second eye, and that way I can be very, very accurate with getting both eyes in the correct spot on the fly. Looks better, and also if you got one eye that's very crooked from the other, it can actually affect the way the fly swims, since these are plastic and can be a little bit of a weight thing. Not much, but it can make it crooked. Maybe not a big deal, but that's the way to make it straight if you want it straight. Next up, I'm going to just clean up around the hook eye a little bit with one of these burning cautery tool, I believe it's called. Just to clean it up a little bit. See, I need just one more cut here. Sorry. All right, you could take this fishing, but since I like a little bit more durability, we'll coat this head. You could coat it with a UV resin if you want. That works fine. And make sure it's a light coat. You don't want to add a lot of weight in the head on this fly. One of the points of using deer hair at all, compared to any other firm stuff you can put there, it's kind of semi-floating. It will keep the fly very level when swimming, which might be what you want, and in other cases you might need something else, but this is what we're doing today. So let's secure it with just a little bit of epoxy. You do not need a lot. What I'm going to do is just put a drop here. And kind of just try and push it into any kind of little air gap in those deer hair fibers. There's not a lot of air here, but you feel what you find. Just going from one side to the other, or the center to the other side. Like that. And since I don't want a lot, I'm just going to finish up with try and use the needle to take off any excess. So it's a very thin coat. And what this does, since it's going down into any kind of gap, it's just going to lock all those deer hair fibers together, making the head a little bit more durable. And a little bit harder as well, and hard is sometimes good. When you're doing a head that has a shape meant to cause a certain type of action, it's usually a good thing to have it a hard head. Some type of fly, some flies, you have a big head using deer hair, but it's very soft, and that's usually for a silhouette fly. But this is this is just a swim tool, this type of head, the wedge heads. So that's it. That's my mini SID that can be used for basically any type of predator, from pike to trout to tarpon, depending on what you're looking for. And obviously you have to switch out hooks to suit what you're fishing for, but it's a very good little fishing tool. So thank you and good luck.